Listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we're going to be talking about the potential gimmick for Nintendo Switch 2. Now when I refer to gimmick, I'm talking about some sort of unique feature that Nintendo will bring to their next system to help it stand out from the rest. And there's been all sorts of gimmicks for the different Nintendo systems over history. For Nintendo 64, it was being a 64-bit system and having 3D polygonal graphics. For Nintendo Wii, it was the motion controls. For Nintendo DS, it was the dual screens. For Nintendo Switch, it was the ability to switch. So what kind of new feature might Nintendo put into Switch 2 to help more people get into the system? Well, that's what we're talking about today. But before we go further, let me point out that we are aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. This is going to be a tall task, even harder than before. But if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, because with your help, it just might be possible. I wish I could tell you that I've made some sort of crazy discovery, or there's been some sort of substantial news that is giving us a really good understanding in terms of what to expect for Nintendo Switch 2. And there are the basic things. We expect this to be another hybrid system. We expect the system to be more powerful than the prior system. We've seen a lot of signs that there's going to be backwards compatibility. It looks like the Nintendo accounts will be transferring over. So that may mean a lot of the NSO content, like the old Nintendo games, N64, Super Nintendo, all of that stuff, that may transfer over. Perhaps our cloud saves as well. So if you have a save file for Breath of the Wild, then you download Breath of the Wild on Switch 2, it may translate over. All of these things we sort of expect. And there's been a lot of discussion about DLSS, which is Deep Learning Super Sampling. It's basically this AI upscaler and artificial intelligence that improves the visuals, and it's something that may be implemented into the next system. And what this ultimately will translate to is that they will be able to put out higher resolutions without impacting performance as much. And there's been a lot of discussion on the power of this next Switch. And from what I've heard and what I've discussed with others, I'm thinking somewhere in the realm of PS4. Perhaps in terms of raw output, it may be a little bit weaker, but given that it's newer technology and also accounting for DLSS, it may actually end up producing visuals that surpass PS4. And for a system that also can be a handheld, and when you also account for what Nintendo can do with weak hardware, especially with things like the Switch, and you look at Tears of the Kingdom, Metroid Prime Remastered, I think Nintendo games are going to look and play really great, and third-party games, they'll get the job done. But those are sort of like the normal, basic, expected things. Nintendo historically likes to bring something new to the table, and they're going to want to try and do something with Switch 2 that perhaps could do better than Switch 1. They're going to try at least. I'm not saying they'll succeed, but they're going to try. For example, the Nintendo DS, it was cool. The dual screens had a lot of great functionality. I really loved that system. But there was another system that came out that I arguably loved more, and that was the Nintendo 3DS. And what Nintendo 3DS did, as you may be able to guess, is implement 3D technology into the games that is glasses free. Before we actually got our hands on this thing, this was a very exciting premise. It was a relatively new technology, and to be able to pull it off on a small handheld where you could play games and see them in actual 3D visuals, not just like polygons, but like with it actually sticking out of the screen and you seeing actual depth, that was a cool concept. And seeing it in practice, it was cool, but over time, they proved to be more of a novelty, just a gimmick. It wasn't a game changer. It's not like moving forward, Nintendo felt like they had to carry over this concept with every single game system, because that was it. The 3DS was it, and then they moved on to the Switch. So I bring this up because when I think about Switch 2, it may be the case that the gimmick we're talking about here is going to be something that won't really change how we play games moving forward. The Switch, I would say it did. Having that ability to switch from handheld to dock all the time seamlessly, that is a true game changer. The Joy-Cons, maybe. But switching is absolutely the big game changer, and that's something I think they're going to stick with moving forward. So Switch 2, that's why we call it Switch 2, because I think it's still going to be able to switch. But what can they bring to the table to at least give us some hope that there might be something even more new and more exciting here, even if down the road we decide it's not really necessary? There's a number of possibilities, and there's a really good chance that what I talk about today will not be what that gimmick is. Some ideas that people have thrown out is maybe virtual reality, VR. Now, VR is very interesting because Nintendo once upon a time kinda did VR with the Virtual Boy. It didn't pan out, but they were experimenting with virtual reality back in the 90s. And now during this modern era, there are a number of VR devices, but all of them are pretty expensive, and it's not something that you can just spend $200 to $300 and be able to play games right out of the box. It's a little bit more pricey than that. But Nintendo did have a cheap alternative for VR, and that was Nintendo Labo. You can build a VR set, a headset out of cardboard, and put your Switch into it and get some semblance of a VR effect for relatively cheap. But naturally, given the power of the Switch and the resolution of the screen, the effect was only so significant. And it wasn't like this was something planned for a whole bunch of games, it was just for a select few games to get a little bit more of a nice visual experience. We've seen Nintendo make mention that they are experimenting and considering the potential future with VR. So it would be somewhat poetic for Nintendo to go back to VR, as they did initially with Virtual Boy, and come up with a legitimate way to have a system that makes VR something that can be truly mainstream. That would mean them finding a way to come up with a VR system that is cheap. But the problem with that is that I'm not sure that's really a reasonable expectation. There's a reason it hasn't happened yet, because it's not cheap. It requires multiple pieces of hardware, and if you want it to be high quality, if you want it to be something that truly is running traditional home console level kind of games, it's unrealistic. Not to mention, Sony's already been in this space for quite some time, and they've been iterating upon it. Nintendo, if they were to do this, they would have to be really confident that what they're doing is better and something that can reach a larger audience. And I'm not so sure they can, so I'm skeptical that VR is the way they're gonna go. Now, I'm not saying there won't be some sort of VR option with Switch 2. I think with Switch 2, if it has a better screen with better technology, maybe also better power consumption so it could last longer, it may be something that seems a little bit more reasonable as a device, but maybe it'll be more of like just like a peripheral that they add to Switch 2 later down the road. So what's another option? Well, there's another technology that Nintendo's played around with over the years, and that's augmented reality. They've played around with it with some of their mobile games like Pokemon Go and Pikmin Bloom, and then of course there was a 3DS that was taking advantage of augmented reality as well. The 3DS actually had a number of interesting gimmicks. One of them included augmented reality, and you could play some games while looking around the world. Now, this would require that there'd be a camera on the Nintendo Switch, at least one camera in the front where you could kind of move around the Switch and play in that way. Now, the problem with this is that would be something for portable mode, not docked mode, because if it's on the Switch, well, when the Switch is docked, that wouldn't be possible. And adding a camera might not be that tough to do. Now, do I think this gimmick would be something that would be game-changing? No, because I have a hard time imagining developers making big, amazing games with augmented reality as a main feature. Maybe some cool side projects that might be a little fun, but nothing super substantial. Now, there would be a way to have AR and still be able to play in TV mode. Let's say there's a camera on the Switch, you move it around as you would, but perhaps the Switch 2, wouldn't actually need to connect to the dock. They could just communicate with it wirelessly. Essentially, what Wii U was. I think this is a possibility as a side option, because I really think having the dock, being able to plug it in and clock up the speeds a little bit because it has a plugged-in power source is better, and that's a great way to charge. Having to rely upon Bluetooth and just the energy usage of the battery itself, I don't think is a great way to play a lot of games. Not if you want this to be a proper hybrid system. As a handheld system, sure, but as something beyond that, no. But perhaps we should be looking at this from another angle. Maybe it's not going to be one big, crazy gimmick that's going to be a massive game changer. Maybe it's going to be a number of little innovations and advancements that are going to make the overall product just seem that much more worthwhile. And as we discussed earlier, if the system has a better screen, if it has better visuals, that alone is going to make it feel like a substantial upgrade for many. But also, if they do something about the Joy-Cons, if they make them more ergonomic, if they make some changes to the actual hardware within the Joy-Cons, that they can phrase in a way that makes people feel assured that the Joy-Con drift will be gone, these are all things that will excite a larger group of people, and it will give Switch 2 at least a little bit of an opportunity to be successful. Will it beat Switch 1? I think it's going to be a tremendous challenge. I think it's going to require a lot of great games, a lot of really good marketing. But on the note of the Joy-Cons, I want to talk about this idea I have that I think could be pretty darn cool. It's a technology that Nintendo was working on a long time ago and we never actually saw come to market. It was back during the Wii days. And this is the vitality sensor. The idea behind this is that it measures your bodily responses, like your heart rate and things of that nature, your electrical signals. So what if they were to make new controllers, both the new versions of the Joy-Cons and also the Pro Controller, something more comparable to what we see with PlayStation 5 controllers, which everyone is raving about. But they also take it another step and they add in vitality sensors. What would be the benefit of this? Well, it would depend on the game. But say for example it's something like Ring Fit Adventure, that will be pretty easy. It can measure your heart rate. But what about horror games or first-person shooters? For example, Metroid Prime 4. What's interesting about the Prime series is that you play it in first person. The perspective is that you are in a suit and there's a visor that's giving you information about yourself. So what if the vitality sensor added another level to that, like your heart rate or something to that effect, which could add a little bit more to the immersion of the game. And perhaps the game could react to how you respond. So if there's a jump scare, it knows when it scared you, or perhaps it knows when it doesn't scare you, so it changes around its tactics. That would be really cool. And when I think about this more so, there used to be a concept for the Metroid series, a Metroid Prime 1.5, what eventually became Metroid Prime 2, but they had some really cool ideas for Metroid Prime 1.5. It was going to take place in a space station from what I remember, and the ultimate idea behind it was that there was going to be this AI that controlled the space station, and it would be playing different tricks on you, locking down rooms, gassing you out, creating illusions and things of this nature, messing with the lighting. So if there's a vitality sensor that could be measuring your responses to the game world, perhaps that could fluctuate. Or imagine another kind of game where you have to compose yourself and it's measuring that composure. I'm not saying this would absolutely change the game across the board for every single game out there. It would add a little bit of an extra layer to the overall experience. And I think this could go for a number of games. Tears of the Kingdom and its depths, that's quite scary. Maybe they could add another wrinkle to that if there's some sort of DLC that comes out around the time of Switch 2. Maybe there could even be some rhythm games as well that can match up to your pulse. There are a lot of potential ideas. And it's hard to say what's going to be the idea that's going to take things to the next level. But maybe Nintendo doesn't have to do anything absolutely crazy. PlayStation and Microsoft haven't done anything absolutely crazy either. It's just improving upon things, with maybe a few neat little gimmicks here and there, maybe like the vitality sensor. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andre's Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.